Deputy Lord Mayor, Councillor Paul.
You'll have to excuse me as virtually everything is new, so I will do my best with the guidance I have from both left and right and forward. Well, good evening, councillors, and welcome to this evening's extraordinary council meeting. Before we do commence the evening's business, can I please give you a usual reminder, remain focused on the topic being discussed during debate. Please avoid repeating points that have already been made. Please avoid interrupting other councillors whilst they are speaking and respect the position of the Deputy Lord Mayor. During debate, please indicate by show of hands and I will call you as appropriate. Please also remember that questions and responses are given without debate. Please can members rise on any point of order which relates to an alleged breach of a standing order or statutory provision and specify which standing order or statutory provision they consider has been broken. Any personal explanation by a member must be confined to some part of a former speech which appears to have been misunderstood in the debate. We shall now move to a first item on our agenda, which is agenda item 1. This offers the opportunity for members of the public to ask a question. I can confirm that no public questions have been received. We therefore move to agenda item 2. The next business of agenda item 2 relates to questions from members in accordance with Standing Order 8. I can confirm that no members' questions have been received. And we are therefore moving on to agenda item 3. Now the next item, item 3, which is to note that there is an appendix 2 for item 4A, is a part 2 item. If the contents of the appendix require debate as part of item 4, we will need to pass the resolution in the agenda to move to part 2, but I would prefer that we stay in part 1 for as long as possible. Okay, so we now are on agenda item 4, page 3 of the agenda. This relates to the report on Exeter Science Park Limited, conversion of debt to equity. Councillor Bialik, I understand that you will introduce this item.
Thank you, Deputy Lord Mayor. There are indeed 5 recommendations for us to consider this evening. And normally I'll just say there and we get straight into it, but I think it is appropriate that in moving them, I speak to them, so I will need a second or first.
Thank you, Leader. Do we have a seconder?
Seconder.
Thank you, Councillor White.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. In moving these 5 recommendations, members will note the report and your advice with regard to any potential part 2 matter. The first recommendation is for the Council to reaffirm our support for the Exeter Science Park as a driver for delivering high-quality jobs to the local community. Recommendation 2, that we authorise the Section 151 officer to agree a conversion of the Council's outstanding loan to equity in conjunction and on the condition that each of the other owners agree to do the same. The conversion to include an obligation placed on the company to buy back the shares as and when the land sales provide sufficient funds to do so. 3, and I'll go slow on this and people need to, this is because there is a bit of an either or in there, so to follow it. So it will read the appointment of a councillor to act, so we delete the word between to and act, to act as a shareholder representative with and delete section 151 officer to delete with the Director of Finance as an advisor. The councillor shareholder will be Councillor Matt Vizard, who is the portfolio holder, Deputy Lord Mayor. Number 4 is to authorise the section 151 officer to support the implementation of recommendations as set out in the recent review undertaken by Deloitte. Now, there are a number of headings here. This is to deliver a clear marketing and business development strategy, to deliver a sustainable operating and funding model via cost reduction and restructuring of the debt, to improve the governance by reviewing the further agreement and reserved matters, and D, to secure an updated local development order and start the process to bring in either private sector investor or private sector developer to support the delivery of the remainder of the science park. Number 5, Deputy Lord Mayor, tells us that we delegate authority to the shareholder representative to vote on matters arising at shareholder meetings where there is no financial implication for to the council and matters which would be reserved for council. Decisions which have an impact on the financial position of the council, amendments to the further agreement and or reserved matters, approval of a business plan for the science park, and a decision to change the strategic direction of the science park. So there's a number of proposals there which deals with the governance and going forward, and I feel sure some more points will be drawn out. Deputy Lord Mayor, if it comes to the recommendations, then clearly those questions will be directed to myself. If it comes to a matter of technical detail, any question that may arise from the member, with your permission, Deputy Lord Mayor, I will ask the 151 Director of Finance just to advise us, but he is here to give technical information, not to advise politically, because we can do all that. So that's how I propose to take this forward, Lord Mayor. So I so move.
Thank you. Now, obviously, as we learnt at our most recent training, amendments can be moved at any stage during the debate. I'm going to ask now, do you want to bring forward amendments now?
Thank you, Deputy Lord Mayor. May I ask a point of clarification? Are we able to take questions of clarification before we move to moving recommendations, or do you wish to move recommendations now?
My understanding is that if you want a point of clarification, you ask it straight away, and that clarification can be given to you as long as it is on something that has already been said.
Thank you. I think we've got a couple of points of clarification, which are not political points at all, just points of clarification, if that's okay.
It obviously depends on what those points are. Please be careful remembering about part 2, and technical questions will be asked by the relevant officer and not by the leader.
Thank you.
Councillor Mannion.
Yeah, I had a technical question. What are the implications on the council's borrowing requirement of the conversion of the loan to equity?
Lena, would you like to respond, or should I pass that to the officer?
I'm happy for the Director to answer the technical question.
Again, I thought these points of clarification were relating to items which you had said, but thank you, Mr. Dobson.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. So, when the loan was initially given to the Science Park, the City Council took out borrowing. I don't mean we physically went and borrowed money from the PWRB, but purposes of our accounts, it formed part of our capital financing requirement. But for members who've been here long enough, you'll know that we have charged MRP against our loans, arguing that they would be repaid and that would reduce the capital financing requirement accordingly. Once the conversion to equity happens, then there will be a repayment of debt, which will be around £40,000 a year until the equity is paid off. That's in line with the other equity that we have in the science park. So that's the outcome of it. There's no interest issues. It's in exactly the same position as it was when it was a loan, so there was interest to be paid or interest foregone on the loan, and that will be exactly the same position for the equity.
Councillor Moore. Councillor Medder, sorry. Councillor Moore first, please.
Thank you. Just a point of clarification. So, in relation to recommendation 3 that the leader mentioned, the appointment of the council to act as a shareholder representative, not a director.
Yes.
So the director will remain.
Will support the shareholder representative.
So the director, Exeter City Council's director on the board of the Science Park will remain as Victoria Hatfield. Is that correct? Or will it? Yes. Okay. Thank you.
Councillor Bennett.
Thank you, Deputy Lord Mayor. Maybe a technical question, Leader. Within the report, the Exeter Science Park Limited annual report and financial statements show the end of March 2023. Are you able to give us any updated report for this financial year, please?
Thank you, Leader. Mr. Hodgson.
Thank you, Deputy Lord Mayor. Unfortunately, I'm not able to do that at the moment, but I will commit as soon as they publish their accounts to provide that update to all councillors. They act in a more commercial way to compare to the council, and therefore they haven't completed. They don't have to complete and publish their accounts until the end of December 2024 for the last financial period. I could tell you exactly Exeter City Council's position, but I'm afraid not the science one.
Councillor Vizard.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Another technical question, if I may, just on point 2 of the recommendations, which authorises Section 151 of such a agreed conversion of council's outstanding loan to equity. It goes on to say the conversion to include an obligation placed on the company to buy back shares as and when land sales provide sufficient funds to do so. If we reach that point, what happens to Exeter City Council's interest? Do we drop out? Do we have a plan going forward? Thank you.
Mr. Hodgson, thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Lord Mayor. So it's absolutely not the intention of the 4 owners to allow the science park to become its own owner. So the expectation is it will be a buyback and destroy programme for the shares to ensure that the 4 owners keep the ownership. The impact will actually be that it will just change the shareholdings percentages back to what they originally were once those shares. So it's not an intention, and we're not really supposed to take additional money out. So the initial investment is not intended to be recovered. It's purely the agreement with the Regional Development Agency, which is now with Homes England, doesn't allow the science park to pay dividends, for example.
Any other points of clarification? Councillor Mitchell.
Thank you, Deputy Lord Mayor. Following on from an earlier point, could the leader or the an actual director, please clarify the difference in role between a director that we've appointed to this board, which is currently an officer of this authority, as most of the other authorities have done as well, and the power of a shareholder representative when it comes to voting or decision making and reporting back to this council.
Thank you, Leader. Mr. Hodgson.
Thank you, Deputy Lord Mayor. So, very different director for the purposes of a private company is governed by Companies Act 2006 and has to act in the interests of the company as opposed to the appointed organisation that they work for. So in matters of business, as board of directors, they're acting in the interests of the company. The shareholder rep is acting on behalf of the council as a owner of the science park and therefore is looking after the interests of the city council as opposed to the company itself. So it's trying to protect the interests of the city council. So as shareholder representative, there are a range of reserved matters as part of the articles of the company, and those will come to the shareholders for consideration. The main things being a new updated business plan, issues around finances would come to the science park, to the shareholder representatives, and then it's quite a stringent set of matters, reserved matters, so even things such as the science park being able to spend £50,000 of its own money is a reserved matter for shareholders. So it's quite an onerous set of reserved matters, hence the recommendation to review reserved matters because it's probably more onerous than it needs to. And as set out in the report, I'm recommending that a number of those reserved matters are so important they should come to full council for consideration.
Thank you. Councillor Mitchell.
I've known in the past where representatives of local authorities have sat on other bodies, Surplus Water for example in the past, where they then refused to answer questions in the chamber about surplus water because they had a different role from being a county councillor as distinct. Can we be quite clear on Councillor Vizard's accountability to us as a council on matters relating to the science park?
So, now you've got your own microphone.
Thank you, Deputy Lord Mayor. It's a hold it. So somebody's so thank you, Deputy Lord Mayor. So I see that there's absolutely no conflict here. The shareholder representative is acting in the interest of the council. They're not privy to private information as a director on the board of directors, and they're not taking decisions on behalf of the company that may potentially conflict with the interests of the city council. So in my opinion, I see no issue with anyone having to recuse themselves. If they were sitting on the board, that may be an absolutely different matter and would probably preclude them from sitting. But in this role, you're absolutely looking after the interests of the council, not the company.
Mr. Atkinson.
Thank you. This is a technical question again, sorry. The money that's been repaid to the LEP, what's happened to that money on the winding part of the LEP, and can we not access it in some shape or form? Thank you.
Straight to Mr. Hodgson.
Thank you, Deputy Lord Mayor. I don't get to say this much when we do the budget. So you're absolutely right. The LEP has now been ended and wound down. So I think the money goes back to the accountable body, which was Somerset Council, and then the assets of the LEP as a whole will be divvied up between the four upper tier owners, so Somerset, Devon, Plymouth and Tor Bay. So it's likely the money will go to Devon County Council, but with the specific purposes that it was originally intended. So they won't be able to use it to manage their general fund, to offset any reductions they may need to make. They can only use it for the purposes that the government originally gave to the LEP. And the intention is that ultimately it will end up in combined authority. Combined authority.
Right, thank you. I think we've finished with our clarification on the first part of the report. Councillor Moore, I understand you wish to move an amendment. Yes.
Thank you, Deputy Lord Mayor. Yes, I'd like to make further 3 additional recommendations, which, after hearing the clarifications, I think still stand. Thank you.
Do you have a seconder for those?
Thank you. I'd like to second that, and if I could reserve the right to speak later in the debate. Thank you.
Thank you. I would like just everybody to confirm that they do have a copy of the additional recommendations in front of them so they know what we're talking about now. Right, that's finished. Okay. Councillor Moore, if you wish to speak to your amendments.
Thank you, Deputy Lord Mayor. I'll read them out. The first one is that the shareholder representative report back to Council not later than January 2025 on the progress and the matters in recommendation 4 and the company's ability to undertake the share buyback. The second one is, as set out in minute 27 of the audit governance minutes of the 30th of November 2022, the next audit governance committee received a report on the review of the governance of external companies and consider appropriate arrangements for the nomination of shareholder representatives to and the proper oversight of all council-connected companies and make recommendations to the executive. And finally, to provide a report of all other unsecured loans and list to the council of those loans. So those are the recommendations that we would make. We know that the leader earlier in his career was a bus driver, so he'll be familiar with the notion that 3 buses come along at the same time. And it seems only like a few moments ago that we saw the closure of the failed Exeter Futures and administration's failed oversight leading to the shutting down of Exeter City Living. Now we have 3 special purpose vehicles turning up, not to be confused with public service vehicles limping back to the garage to be fixed. So, we as shareholders are being asked to pay more to get the buses back on the road. And if the council is to do that, we have to learn from the lessons from the special purpose vehicles that have already been pointed out by the council's auditors in 2022 about appropriate governance arrangements and oversight of such vehicles. And I think this was helpful advice. We want to see that these lessons can be filtering through and the Audit and Governance Committee discussed them at the time, and that these issues are addressed in advance rather than when there is yet another problem. So the Audit and Governance Committee have discussed this issue and made recommendations to the Executive, and I'm really disappointed that the Executive haven't progressed them since that meeting of November 2022. That's been quite a lot of time. The governance arrangements of council-connected companies included the following recommendations. So the minutes say the Director of Finance confirmed that the review of the governance of external companies was underway, and that was at that time in November, and he would inquire on the time frame for the process from the leader and the Chief Executive and Growth Director. Following some discussion, a proposal to ensure the Chartered Institute of Public Financing and Accountability Guidance, CIPFA, was taken into consideration in the review of governance arrangements for the City Council. And it was anticipated that the report from the outcome of the review would be made to the Executive and then Council before coming back to the Audit and Governance Committee. So that over that time, it still hasn't happened. So we've not had a confirmation of the timetable from the leader. And recently, you'll remember, Deputy Lord Mayor, that I asked a question about that, when that process will be introduced. So the Audit Governance Committee made 2 recommendations. One is to note the CITFO report and the guidance being taken into consideration in the review of governance arrangements for City Council companies, and the Audit and Governance Committee to receive the report on the approved governance arrangements once adopted by Council. So I think this is a timely opportunity to make sure that these matters are progressed. There has been a clear request for this action and a clear promise made that this will happen. So our 3 additional amendments enable the administration to bring forward appropriate arrangements and introduces accountability on the decisions that are being made this evening. So we feel that they are enabling and helpful ones. And we feel that this will help show how the council can achieve its goal of being a well-run council, and that there's proper oversight of the council's connected companies, of which there are more, and we need action, and the appropriate time to act is now. Thank you.
Does anybody else wish to speak on this motion? Amendment to the motion. Councillor Mitchell.
Thank you, Deputy Lord Mayor. I think I'd like to stress at the start that these amendments are no way wrecking amendments, and they're to strengthen our position as a council and our position as councillors. The aim, as Councillor Moore has stated, is to reflect on past situations, looking at this situation, and ensuring that we don't come back again, find a similar situation in 6 months' time, or in 9 months' time with another one of our connected bodies. Underlying all of this is our accountability as councillors for public money. It's easy to say we'll convert this to this. This is £1 million plus interest, 1.2 million accumulated, but we're unlikely to get returned to our coffers. That is 1.2 million that could have been used elsewhere in the past. One thing I'd like to know, that will come out hopefully in the debate, is that other councils have already resolved this issue. You know, East Devon have decided, Devon County Council decided some time ago. I know we were impacted by Purdah, and that we could not make decisions for some period of time. But the point is, this issue has been around this company for some period of time. It's highlighted in the 2022 annual report that they have this problem with LEP. We know in the government the LEPs were being stood down. So clearly this is an issue. We know that Somerset's got no money, so we know they had an issue with this sum of money that's lying around. So again, how do we as a council get to grips with this? How do we know what is happening? How do we as members respond? I just don't like the idea that we're in a post office saga. Nobody told us. I didn't know. I had enough of that last week on the television. We as elected members should not be in that position. We should have proper accountability, proper information coming back in annual reports, etc., on each of the bodies that we're connected with, so we can question, we can look into them if there are issues, rather than just waiting as we are before an extraordinary meeting, a last-minute decision. I do endorse fully what the leader said in regard to a councillor being our stakeholder, shareholder representative on this, supported by an officer. We've already got an officer there as a director on that. I think it's interesting when you go onto the Companies House website for Exeter Science Park. Since they were set up, they've had 42 officers holding appointments. 35 of those have resigned. And I was looking up for, at least they've got one director who's a councillor on East Devon Council. Appointed in 24, went again on Companies House, he was terminated. 3 have been terminated in the last 3 weeks. This doesn't reek of people with stability and the ability for the public sector to hold these people truly to account for what they're doing. Because in the end, it is effectively a semi-public private enterprise. We are stakeholders, East Devon Council stakeholders, the university stakeholders, and Devon County Council. And also I found another little body that we've never discussed, called the Exeter East Devon Enterprise Zone. I don't know if we charge money for people to use the term Exeter, because we're not involved in it. It's called the Exeter East Devon Enterprise Zone, which is another partnership that underpins this in a public-private nature. So again, it raises this question of accountability for this style of company to us, when they're totally, on the whole, appearing to rely on government grants and government loans to maintain their business. And if you go onto their website, you see that this business is underwritten, or says it's underwritten, until 2035, with a duty to create 3,500 jobs. It started in 2010, they've created 550 so far. There's still another 3,000 to go. And clearly, I believe, in supporting our amendments, you're getting a process underway to ensure we don't get in this situation again, and we as a council and councillors get regular reports and are aware of the governance and accountability issues of bodies in which we are investing public money on behalf of the citizens of Exeter. Thank you.
Right, Councillor Palmer, I saw you, remember you did reserve your right to speak. You want to take that moment now? Or do you want to wait till the end?
That's fine, I'll do it now, thank you. So just a couple of weeks after being elected, I find myself here this evening having to question yet another poor financial decision, and one that seems to have been made without any transparency, either to elected members or to the general public. And as my colleagues have reminded you, this is the third time in just a few short months that we've been left questioning your ability to manage financial matters and make sound business decisions that benefit the residents of this city. Now, probably like lots of you here, I've got a responsible job in my professional career. I manage big budgets, I have to make big critical business decisions. I wouldn't expect to remain employed for very long if I'd made the serious catalogue of errors that you continue to make. Once again, let's just remind ourselves, this is another opportunity where you took a large chunk of public money, you invested it seemingly without asking any of the right questions or having any governance or oversight that was ongoing. Anyone who understands the wider research and development landscape will know that there are huge challenges and constant changes in the way that organisations work. That's not new. Making the science park a long-term venture and seeing some return on that investment requires a high degree of financial and business acumen. And given the previous financial judgments made here, I'm not sure I have the trust and confidence in your ability to manage this process going forward. Now, I hope, if you accept our amendments, that further scrutiny of the investments that are made, that proper transparency, and as opposition, we can hold you to account. We can ensure that residents are fully aware of how money is being invested and that we're not wasting it on vanity projects and that we're actually providing the vital services that the people of this city need and want. Thank you.
Councillor Atkins.
Thank you. I just wondered if there was obviously much
Could I ask you, Councillor, to use a microphone?
I wonder if you read the report and the history of this, and you call this a vanity project. If it was a vanity project set up at the early part of this century by the Regional Development Agency to develop a science park to make the economy of Devon and this city fantastic. That was a decision not made by this council, but made by the Regional Development Agency, with government support being supported by successive governments, including the successor to the Regional Development Agency, the Local Enterprise Council, Somerset Council, Local Enterprise Partnership, etc. So hardly a vanity project, hardly something ill thought through. And the fact is, we do have a fantastic science park up there supporting our world-class university. So I find it staggering that Devon County Council, Somerset, both governments, all parties in supporting this. You know, we should get the opprobrium from the party opposite saying this is a vanity project and you're thought through and stuff happens. If I had had the foresight and vision, back in 25 years ago to consider the circumstances that happen today, well, I mean, the party opposite, do you have that kind of insight? Things happen? No, you don't, I'm afraid, or else you wouldn't have lost things like Brighton City Council control and things like that. You don't have the control that you think you do have over things. Now, what I was going to speak on something else before I heard the member give that, what amounts to a complete diatribe against, both sets of governments, all parties, including this. It was supported by all parties. We are where we are, but I want you to speak specifically on the Audit and Governance Committee, because I have had a look at the terms of reference of that committee while we've been sitting here, and I think, well, there's nothing in the terms of reference of that committee which would suggest the recommendation that's being made. So I just wonder if perhaps you could clarify to me which terms of reference you are relying on for making that recommendation, because I can't see it in there. We haven't had any, anything to suggest what you're suggesting. So that was just a clarification. Thank you.
Before I go to you, Councillor, I have Councillor Jobson next, but I just want to ask if you want to respond to that request for clarification on part of your speech you made earlier.
Absolutely, definitely, Lord Mayor. Thank you for your question. So this is a matter of governance, and it was an issue that came up and had an appropriate discussion in the context of the auditor's report to the meeting of November 2022, and that was an appropriate discussion that's had, and it was discussed, and the recommendations were made by the Audit and Governance Committee, and they made 2 further recommendations in addition to the discussion around the auditor's report. And there was clear recommendations which were made at that time, and we were told that the executive were going to address this. So it's an appropriate discussion within the terms of reference in response to the auditor's report. Absolutely appropriate. It's been a very, very, very long time before, well, we haven't seen any action yet. So this is why it's being referred back to, because it has been discussed in the appropriate place, and now we're waiting for appropriate action.
Councillor Jobson.
Thank you, Deputy Lord Mayor. Just before I start to speak, could I just ask for clarification? I'll be simply speaking on the amendments proposed by the Progressive Group.
We are in debate on the amendments.
Can you put me back down, please?
Okay. Right, Councillor Fulham.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I just, well, I'd like to speak particularly to the third amendment, and I'd encourage people to support it. It's disappointing at the last AGM. I know it's not a place where we have debates and discussions, but it's disappointing again to see the same sort of process of the leadership of scrutiny being held by the ruling administration. I just think it's a very unhealthy situation. I much prefer the Labour Party of the pre-2008, where the convention of opposition scrutiny was in place.
Councillor, can I ask you please to address the matter on this?
But the issue at hand is the transparency that has led to the situation where we find ourselves at this late hour, where the maturity of this loan is a long period loan is coming to final maturity, and now we're making a decision at this stage. So what I'm trying to do, Lord, with this amendment, what I'm supporting this amendment for, is to how we all collectively as councillors can have a dashboard of lights really to give us heads up on these situations. I hope this is not something controversial that people can't support. The question I'd ask is, what other unsecured loans do we have? From my understanding, the council puts short-term money in with other councils, and there's an existential question: if they go bust, then what sort of country have we got? But there are going to be money allocated to, and I'm not saying they're bad reasons, and the science park is providing good positive outcomes. So let's not say it's all a bad thing and that the money's been wasted.
Sorry, Councillor, I'm still struggling to understand how it is you're speaking to any of the points that we have before us. You seem to be just making a general conversation about things rather than specifically addressing. If you're speaking in support of the amendment item 3 to provide a report of all unsecured loans and risk to council those loans, please can you just speak to that?
I was thinking that if the rationale for providing that, for taking that action, it's our Deputy Lord Mayor, and the rationale is information. So the question is, I would support that amendment on the basis of we need a full, comprehensive picture of all the loans and equity we've taken up and the risks to those loans and equity, and also a systematic, perhaps dashboard like we have for services, red, amber, greens. I'd like to see red, amber, greens for the money that this council has invested in these subjects going along with plenty of lead time. So it's a 10-year loan. Where are we at for 3 years, 5 years, 7 years? What are the prospects going forward? The issue is there's £40,000 a year coming out of the budget. We'll be sitting here in February desperately trying to scrape out 40 grand out of services, and there's every hope that that money will come back through the value of those shares sustaining themselves and being liquidizable in the future. I'm not confident in that. That's why I support the motion. Apologies for the digression.
Right, I have nobody else on my list of speakers. Okay. You're going to speak in relation to this. I think you go after Councillor Moore. Not right?
Yes, Councillor Moore.
Yeah, Councillor Moore first, then yourself.
Thank you very much. I'm glad that people have contributed to this discussion about our amendments. I mean, and I think actually, Legion and I can agree that we both want the same thing, well-run council, and these 3 additional amendments are helping to promote that with some specific actions. And the first one is about specific actions, so we all understand what is happening. The second one is around following from the promises and the commitments that were made and the recommendations for the government. And the third one is about helping all councils understand where we are in terms of other financial risks. So it's not complicated, it's not wrecking, it's completely enabling and completely in support of our shared goal of a well-run council. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Biar.
Thank you, Deputy Lord Mayor. I'd like to thank Councillor Atkinson, who sort of put a little bit of context to some of this discussion, and I obviously look forward to further contributions from Councillor Palmer, telling us where we all went wrong and eventually putting us all right. I really look forward to that. And of course, an opportunity is being taken by the opposition, which is disappointing. Disappointing to point score. So it is disappointing, well, not by all of the opposition, I am glad, to point score and to tell us where we all got it wrong. This has been going on since 2022. Well, I've not heard anything over there reminding us. I hear a lot of other questions, Deputy Lord Mayor. I hear a lot of other things. So looking at the First Amendment, well, just to make it clear, there is no need for us to support any of these amendments, and my group would not be supporting any of these amendments, Lord Mayor. But just to clarify as to the reasons why, on point 1, I do not suggest that we wait until January 2025, when there is no council meeting, and I don't think people would appreciate a special one, to be told whether or not the conversion into shares can take place. I'd like to think as soon as agreement is made, Deputy Lord Mayor, with the other agencies, we can advise members immediately that that share transfer is taking place. We've no need to wait until January. With regard to the development, and we've been told in there about the local development order, we don't know what time that will take. We have to work with the other partners, and as soon as that is done, we will bring that forward. But I will be suggesting that we give some feedback in progress, and I will say how we will do that in a moment, Deputy Lord Mayor, once I've answered it. As for point 2, well, point 2, that is already a minute of audit and governance, and we've no need to reiterate it here at this. I will be asking the monitoring officer and the solicitor to examine exactly, as Councillor Atkinson quite rightly drew to our attention, what is the function of the Audit and Governance Committee in relation to all of this. Because at the end of the day, all appointments are basically, if not appointed by the executive under delegated powers, are brought back to this council. We do not delegate it to a particular committee in relation to all of that, so we won't be supporting that. As to provide a report on the other unsecured loans, that is apparently to happen, and I'm told there's only one at this particular moment in time, and that is with CoLab. And so I can't see a rush of councillors telling us to pull that loan in pretty quick. That would be a disaster for CoLab and what we're trying to do through all of that. So it is disappointing that a number of points scoring needed to be dealt with on the other side, as opposed to looking to the recommendations, which I will further address once we have dealt with the voting procedures on this. But just to add, Deputy Lord Mayor, some of the points that is contained in these recommendations I intend to take away and try to bring forward to see what we can do within the terms of the recommendations. Not everything, in order for us to do something, Deputy Lord Mayor, needs to be done by virtue of a notice of motion or an instruction. At times we need to trust ourselves, and this has been not the best saga in our relationship with the science park. We need to get in there, and I'll deal with this in the summing up of the other, because I don't want to cross that at this moment, Deputy Lord Mayor. But what I will be suggesting in that summing up, if this helps the members when they sort of their incredulity at the fact that we won't be supporting their motions, I have every intention as part of the process going forward, one, asking the officers to do a members' briefing in relation to the science park for all members to attend, to make sure that we can, and whether that is getting somebody like Sally Basker along, I don't know, I'll leave it to the officers to say, to come along, to give us an update. We have had them in the past, to be fair to them, to talk about what we're doing there. This will help Councillor Vizard, who must be wondering what hole he's being pushed into without a particular ladder at this particular time, but there is one foot in. And then secondly, that I'll be asking Councillor Vizard to put forward, and through our director to put forward a suggestion that we have some form of internal scrutiny committee within the science park, which would have all the interested stakeholders. Now, this is not a public body in the true sense of the word, so that may end up being in part two, whereby we can have some sort of scrutiny of some of the work they are doing with East Devon, County, ourselves, and the university. I think that would be helpful, other than members of the executive, to engage councillors, because I can sense a degree of interest. So that would be some way that I will refer to in my contribution at the end of the debate on our recommendations on what to do. So in other words, I am trying to take this forward in an open and collegiate way, putting the point scoring to one side and trying to take out the positives of what has been said, to try to take it forward for the interest of the city, our relationship with the science park, and hopefully that our investment is secure, because let's not forget why we've done it in the first place. So, unfortunately, from the other side point of view, the Labour Group will not be supporting these amendments. Thank you.
Thank you, Leader. We now have... I will just point out, Councillor Miller, you were not present at the beginning of this debate, and therefore I'm afraid we're not going to include you in the vote. We are going to move to a vote on the amendments. I propose that we vote on each one in turn. So we do... Or are we going to move all as one? They have been moved as one, so they've been moved as one, so we take them all as one. So I understand that you do not have the text of these amendments. So I will, for the sake of clarity, read them out to you again. Amendment 1, additional recommendation that the shareholder representative report back to the council not later than January 2025 on the progress of the matters in recommendation 4 and the company's ability to undertake the share buyback. Additional recommendation number 2, as set out in minute 27 of the Audit and Governance minutes of the 30th of November 2022, the next Audit and Governance Committee received the report on the review of the governance of external companies and consider appropriate arrangements for the nomination of shareholder representatives to and the proper oversight of all council-connected companies and make recommendations to the executive. The additional recommendation number 3 is to provide a report of all other unsecured loans and risk to the council of those loans. I now call for a simple show of hands. Okay, can I please see a show of hands of those in favour of that group of recommendations? Can I see a show of hands of those against the adoption of these amendments?
Lord Mayor.
Can I ask if there are any abstentions?
That's 3, Lord Mayor. Those additional recommendations have not been carried.
Right, we now move on to the original motion. text, I believe you do have.
Well, I've moved it, Lord Mayor, so
Yes.
debate and I'll come in at the end.
Right, okay, so I'm now asking if anybody wishes to speak on these recommendations. Councillor Vizard first.
Thank you very much, Lord Mayor. I welcome the debate, and I think, like a lot of people, the paper came as a surprise to me, but an opportunity as well. I very much welcome the securing of our investment through equity as opposed to a loan. I think that is the right step, and hopefully when we can all agree. And I also welcome the leader's suggestion of a council briefing. I think that's very important on the work of the Science Park and all it seeks to do, and also of some scrutiny, however that is managed and arranged. I think is very welcome. I'm very, very happy once I'm immersed within this organisation to report back. So please be assured, fellow councillors, that nothing will be hidden. And just to say about the Science Park, I understand it's created 750 jobs in itself, so it's very important that we play our part in securing its future. And as I say, this I think is an opportunity for us now to have a greater say in terms of its direction and its future, which I hope will be strong, particularly if we secure a different government in the coming weeks, where science will be a little higher up the agenda. Thank you very much.
And I have Councillor Johnson.
Thank you, Deputy Lord Mayor. My remarks relate to recommendation 2. Exeter City Council has a fiduciary duty to recover and preserve its funds. It's a legal obligation, and the council taxpayers of Exeter will expect nothing less in any event. The difficulty of the proposal in this recommendation is that it is all too easy to see how that obligation might not be met. The council is currently due to be repaid the sum of about 1.238 million in January 2025, just over 6 months off, and 10 years after the initial loan was made to Exeter Science Park Limited. A loan which was made with the council as an unsecured creditor. The suggestion to convert that loan to an equity stake, I would suggest, is not the right approach when our fiduciary duty is considered. Surely our duty is to recover those funds loaned. Further, I would suggest this has to be considered in light of warnings given at recent council meetings as to the likelihood of there being further tightening of council funding. We cannot afford to be generous with council taxpayers' money. The report before us states that ESPL is unable to repay the loan when it falls due in January. This is in spite of the fact that the interest charged on the borrowing is extremely competitive at about 2.55%, and that they've had 10 years in which suddenly went quiet. No, sorry, it just went quiet. Here the mic had gone off. In the event that the proposal, which of course clearly benefits the Exeter Science Park to convert the loan to equity, there'll be no interest charge, and Exeter will end up with a smaller share of the company. The council cannot rely on getting its money back with an equity share, and should Exeter Science Park not succeed, and don't get me wrong, I sincerely hope that it does succeed, but they presumably have to wait for a sale of an asset if it did not before recovering our money. This is all too speculative. It's clear that the financial viability of ESPL is reliant on attracting further investment. There's no evidence before us that there is any in the pipeline. It is also too speculative in that current performance, according to the director's report, shows that occupancy levels of lettable space has reduced from 96% to 70% in the past 4 years, 10% below the 80% level required to break even. I may well hope that the ESPL's strength in marketing and business development elements succeed. I do not believe it is right to suggest that the Exeter Council taxpayer survives on a wing and a prayer that such strategy will be successful. In addition, changes are proposed to the gateway policies currently adopted by ESPL. These are that companies based at Exeter Science Park must be science related and demonstrate research and development of products or services, active collaborations with universities university, higher education institutes, research or similar organisations, and a technology-based service. Reports suggest that 10%, coincidentally the figure required to reach break-even for the space, could be used by business support organisations such as lawyers and accountants. Again, speculative, no evidence that any such organisations are looking to locate at the science park, and also relies on the interpretation of gateway policies by UK Science Park Association's interpretation of those policies. Clearly, ESPL requires private sector support, and I genuinely hope that they are successful in finding such support. However, council taxpayer cannot rely on speculation, and it does not come close, in my view, to meeting our fiduciary obligations to council taxpayer. Whilst there may well be merit in negotiating perhaps a partial repayment or an extension of time for repayment or a mixture of the two to a later date in 2025, I do not support the proposal to convert the loan into an equity stake, and I cannot therefore support the recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you. Just before we move on, I do want to remind everybody that if you are at any stage relating to the content of Appendix 2, we will need to move into Part 2 as there are members of the public present. I realise that you will be very careful there, Councillor Johnson, but I am just reminding other speakers as we go. Okay, I have Councillor Palmer.
Thank you. So, Leader, thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to let you know where it went wrong. So, I actually do work in the industry, in the wider industry. I've just spent 3.5 years looking at location strategy for my organisation and the wider ecosystem in which we work, in terms of thinking about where we put bums on seats, where people are working remotely, where we might need wet, dry labs. So actually I do have expertise, and that's where I'm telling you that I have genuine concerns that there hasn't been the sufficient oversight. So this isn't a new kind of thing, you know, STEM isn't new, the growth of STEM isn't new, and actually the changes in the way that STEM organisations work isn't new either. We're evolving, we're changing, you know, COVID's forced us to change. We're about to have a general election. You know, we could have, you know, new investment, less investment in STEM, who knows? You know, we're all concerned about the way that we're being funded, what our long-term future looks like as research institutes, and actually that has a really big impact on where we base ourselves, you know, whether we work in science parks, whether we work in academic institutions. So actually, I'm not an expert on many things, but actually on this, I actually do know what I'm talking about. And when I say I have real concerns around the future of this, that's what I'm talking about. Thank you.
Any other councillors wish to contribute to this debate? Councillor Moore.
Thank you very much, Mr. Lord Mayor. I must say that I am quite concerned again to receive quite a charming contortion of the recommendations that you made, because these were considered amendments that added to recommendations that were made. So I'm flagging that up because it's happened again. There have been a number of points at the Audit and Governance and indeed other committees where recommendations have not been progressed as a councillor might reasonably expect. So I should too be writing to the monitoring officer, so hopefully we can discuss together how these things and the proper work of council committees are progressed. I do see the science park as a long-term investment, which in this case is fortunate, isn't it? Supporting the economy and investing in jobs is a really difficult thing to do. And we see initiatives come and go. For example, Exeter Works didn't last for very long. So we do need to see this as a long-term investment. Particularly because science and development of some science is going to be particularly important in issues of tackling climate change. So I think it's absolutely vital that we see how this company can be turned around in the next year. We have to understand completely that £40,000 that has been talked about is going to become an additional burden to the council. So I will support this, but I want to see real action, real change on how this company is operating. We don't have a lot of choice in supporting this because the partners already have decided that. is already been through the other partners, boards and decisions. So there isn't any other alternative at this stage. But I think at this stage, we absolutely have to be considering what the alternatives are, because we can't have it dumped on us at the last meeting, at the last minute, to have a council meeting to sort out a situation that we've had no role or no say in.
Any other councillors wish to? Councillor Atkinson.
Yeah, I have heard what Councillor Johnson had to say, but I do wonder why the Conservatives on this council are taking a different view to the Conservatives who run the county council. And I would hope that for the benefit of Devon as a whole, because this facility benefits the entire Devon County, not just Exeter, that we could have come together on a consensus on this to see a way forward for this fantastic enterprise up there. And I'm really saddened that the Conservatives are so divided that one set of Conservatives don't support another set of Conservatives somewhere else in the county. Thank you.
Any further contributions?
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Just reminding you that in moving the recommendations with the amendment to number 3 that I moved earlier on, just to remind us. First of all, again, like Councillor Atkinson, I'm coming to you a lot tonight, Councillor. I didn't hear an alternative recommendation come from the Conservatives. Are they suggesting that we go to bring the company down to get our money back? Is that what they're proposing? Are they proposing that we end it, we get it, to get the money back? Is that what they're proposing? Because if you are, you need to put an amendment forward to that effect, not just say a lot of words. It's been pointed out by Councillor Atkinson, you are way out of line and out of touch with your county group on all of this. Councillor Palmer, I never said that you didn't know your subject. I never said that at all. And actually, I listened to you, and you have a good understanding of it. The reference I was making about let's not make political score points over this. That's what I was trying to say, but we're all trying to work together to see where we can get. And again, Deputy Lord Mayor, I'm trying to be charming here to bring across the votes to support the recommendations on the other side. And I regard that, although it might be meant as a little bit of an insult, I regarded it as a compliment, by the way. I believe that we need to work together on all of this. This has been brought to our attention now. The spotlight is on it. We need to take it forward. I mentioned when I spoke in relation to the amendment, I believe we need far greater scrutiny over it all, that we need to know what's happening with our investment and our position within the company, because we want to see it work. We want it to bring jobs. We see that this is where the economy needs to go in relation to Exeter to bring those jobs. We know we've had a bit of a torrid time with the economy over the last 3 or 4 years, and so I'm hoping, and yes, I'm hoping there will be change as well, bringing it forward, that we can hopefully get that investment in. It's very important. So I do not think crashing the science park is the answer to get any money back at this stage. We need to, quite right about finances, monitor it, watch it. We will, we must. And so I will be talking to the directors about some of the points raised here this evening, because I think it is important about how we look at this, how we scrutinise things going forward. I hear what they were saying about audit and governance, and about some of the other companies that we have interest. I do understand and agree with that. We need to look at all of that. We are doing that. I'm giving that undertaking here now. I feel hopefully, it won't be such a long time as the time between now and back at the end of 2022 that the difference is coming forward. But there is a memo to ourselves there sometimes. We need to focus on the bigger things and stop going on about other things sometimes, which is not so important. So we need to bring this forward. We need a proper way to bring it. I'm glad that Councillor Vizard accepted the portfolio before I told him he had to do this as well. But I know he will do it. He will rise to it. He will do it. He will have the interest of the council, working with the director to make sure that it's not just about our investment, our interest in the science park for the benefit of residents and around is taken forward. So I accept some of the criticism implied or otherwise about that perhaps we have not had our eye on this particular board. I accept some of that. And we then need to put it right going forward. I think we will, and we will put that in place going forward, Deputy Lord Mayor. So I hope I've charmed enough the opposition, but I hope also I've given them some reassurance on our attitude. Now that this has been brought right there to my attention, I'm not pushing it aside. I am going to look at it. It is important, and we need to deal with this and some of the other issues. And I give that undertaking, and I hope that they will find it in themselves to support the recommendations as amended on number 3, Deputy Lord Mayor.
Thank you, Leader. I'm now move to the vote. The vote is on the recommendations as printed on your sheet. There are 5 with various subdivisions, and we do need to remind you that there were changes to the wording. Can I ask you to read out, because I don't have a note of those.
So number 3 will now read that they will bear the appointment of a councillor to act as a shareholder representative with the Director of Finance as an advisor. That shareholder representative will be Councillor Matheson. That is the event of the change number 3.
Okay, so the altered wording of recommendation 3 is the appointment of Councillor Matt Vizard as the shareholder representative for the Director of Finance as an advisor. Okay, is that understood by all members before we proceed to a vote? Thank you. Okay, I move to the vote. Again, I ask a clear indication with a raised hand for all those in favour of the recommendations.
There's 24 in favour, Lord Mayor.
Thank you. I ask now for those against to please raise their hands.
There's 3 against, Lord Mayor.
And are there any abstentions?
1 abstention, Lord Mayor. So that has been carried as amended.
Thank you. So again, a reminder that has been carried as amended. Thank you, members. That now brings us to the end of the meeting of the Extraordinary Council, which I hereby declare